Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4, verse 6. Welcome to Martial Arts Past and Present with Sensei Ed Briz. Interviews and discussions with martial artists from around the world, along with tournament perspectives.
Welcome to another show of Martial Arts Past and Present. I am Sensei Ed Briz. I hope that you will continue on this martial arts journey with me. I would like to introduce our guest. He's a 9th Dan in the Superfoot system. I met Chris at Bill Superfoot Wallace's big birthday bash. He is also vice president of the business development and black belt testing for the Superfoot system. Kwanja Nim, Chris Natske, welcome.
Thanks, sir. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I've been waiting to get you on the show for quite some time now since we met, and I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Me too. Me too.
Hey, Chris, why don't you give us give the audience a brief overview about yourself, maybe like where you grew up or where you were born?
Very good. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a little town about 30 miles west of Milwaukee called Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. That's Oconomowc, and it's the only city in the nation with 5 O's in its name. So was born and raised there and started my martial art training around 10 years old, right in that area. And then after graduating high school there, went on to play Division I football on scholarship, did that for 4 years, and then went in the corporate world and did that for 10 years before I opened up my own school back in 1995, my own martial arts school. So little abbreviated version of my bio.
Yeah, we're going to get more into that, Chris.
Hey, good.
I understand that from talking with you, I understand that you're a motivational speaker. Mm-hmm. Tell us, how did you get started? It's very interesting. And I thank you for asking that. It's really all martial art related. I mean, I've been in front of a class in front of a martial arts class since I was 13 years old, helping teach classes, right? And so it just continued there, that kind of presence. And then when I went into the corporate world, I had an awful lot of experience of doing public speaking, right? Because I was doing sales. And then eventually I had an assignment where I was doing sales trainings. So I'd have 500 salespeople in a room that I'd be presenting to. But the real place where it began to kind of crystallize for me is when I opened up my own martial arts studio back in 1995, and I had 6 competitors in a 2-mile radius of me. And I was thinking of ways that I could differentiate myself between the other martial arts schools. And there's only so many yellow page ads you can do, and newspaper ads. And I thought, well, you know what? I think I have a skill in terms of speaking. So I started going into schools and doing speaking with martial arts as my overlay, focus on nonviolent conflict resolution and bully proofing. And that was my way that I grew my school. And what ended up happening is after my first year, I had 200 students. And at 5 years, I had 500 students at one location. And it was basically because of doing that program, which eventually turned into what I called Kindness Counts, which is where I would challenge students after I would speak to do 10 random acts of kindness in the week following me coming to the school. So picture if I've seen 600 students and I speak and they do 10 acts of kindness, that's an injection of 6,000 random acts of kindness into a school community. And so that was the premise of my speaking. And I learned very quickly that if I could keep 100 first graders, for instance, inspired, motivated, and keep their attention, I could keep anyone's attention. Right.
That's really the genesis of my speaking career.
Wow. That's fantastic. I would have never thought of even trying something like that. And you came up with this idea and you just started doing it.
Yeah. Well, and it was, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So
Right.
How was I going to differentiate myself? And then what ended up happening is schools started hearing about me and they started reaching out to me to come to their schools. So I'm like, sure, I'll go and speak to your kids and promote my school. So that's how I developed my school, and it just kind of continued from there.
That's fantastic. So, hey, here's the big question to start off with here. How did you first get introduced to martial arts and what drew you to it? Yeah, and I literally shared this story almost every keynote talk that I give. So I started my martial art training in September of 1973. Short little chubby kid. Got to remember at that time, martial arts, the Bruce Lee craze had just started maybe the summer before. So in 1973, there weren't martial arts schools in every corner like they were today. But there was a TV show called Kung Fu.
Hmm.
David Carradine, Kwai Chang Caine walking across the American desert, goes into the little cow town. Bad guys try to beat him up, and he takes care of him using his kung fu. And I literally fell in love. And so I begged my mom to let me go to my first class, which she did. She relented. I remember the exact date. It was September 13th, 1973, because it was my brother's 5th birthday. And I had to talk my mom out of making me go to my brother's birthday party so I could go to my first Taekwondo class, which back in the day was not called Taekwondo. It was called Korean karate.
Hmm.
So I went to my first class and I saw these people doing these amazing movements, and I literally felt like I came home. And and that's really the genesis story. So I've not stopped since then. Outside of maybe taking
Nope.
some time off during football seasons when I was playing Division I football. I couldn't train during the seasons, those four months or whatever. I've been training ever since.
Okay. But no other breaks besides football.
No, no, that's one time I quit for 2 weeks. I got transferred to Cincinnati, Ohio with my corporate job. And I said, I think I'm done. I'd been teaching in California at the time. And I said, I think I'm done with this. And that lasted 2 weeks. And I got antsy and I went out and started working out, and I haven't stopped since. So,
That's great.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm finding more and more of the guys that are a little bit older, like us.
Mhm.
I find that a lot of them never took any breaks.
Yeah.
They just continued on and continued on, such as yourself. I mean, you took a break because of football, but that's not
Right.
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just taking a break and just doing something else, or just not doing anything. And it's great to hear from you and other people that have been saying that, they never wanted to take breaks. They just wanted to continue on.
And even during high school when I was playing football, I was still teaching 3 nights a week. Yeah, during
Wow.
during during 2-a-day practices in high school, one of my black belts would teach for me, but I taught 3 nights a week. That was my high school job. Was I created a martial art program. I was teaching since I was 16 years old. So I was
Hmm.
teaching kids and adults at a community center. So it was my program. And so those 2 weeks of doubles, I took off, or 3 weeks, whatever. But then I was back at it. And even during the football season, I was teaching. So
Wow. Wow. That's great. So there's the love of martial arts right there.
absolutely.
That is definitely the love of martial arts. So how many students have you had come through your school?
Well, I'm guessing right now, this is an estimate of, it's probably in the tens of thousands that I've taught in my 52-year career of teaching and training. And I have about a little over 2,000 students that have received their black belt from me.
2,000 have received black belt, not
Yes.
just 2,000 students.
Correct. So that's coming from our 3 schools here in the Denver area. So I have a 3 school organization that I head up. And so, in fact, I was just at a training a number of them on Saturday. They have a 3-month prep cycle that they have to go through in order before they get to testing. And so I lead those, and I was just doing that on Saturday morning. So
Wow. Wow, that's phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if I told you, Chris, but sometime this year I'm going to start going on the road as the traveling sensei,
okay.
and I would love to come and see your schools and do a
Sure.
live
Yeah,
podcast
absolutely.
from them.
Absolutely. Yeah, come out
Great.
to it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. All right. Besides Taekwondo, what
Yes.
other styles of martial arts have you studied?
Well, clearly the Superfoot system has been incredibly influential in my life. I met Bill Wallace. He was my hero when I was growing up. I had just started my training. It was the first year of my training, and September of 1974 is when he won his world championship title. And
Hmm.
I was babysitting the next door neighbor, and my mom called me up and said, "There's this professional karate thing on. I think you might want to look at." And I had been following him, in the magazines already. So he was already my hero. And, for those of your younger listeners, we didn't have YouTube back in the day. So the way that we got to be in touch with our heroes was through karate magazines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to watch him. This is the first time I ever seen him move live. And he totally dominated not only his competition, but he was the star of the entire tournament. And I remember saying to myself as an 11-year-old, one day I want to kick just like him. I'm still trying. I'm still working at it. But that's really what was the impetus of me getting involved. And I eventually met him in 1986 at a seminar in Wisconsin. I was living in Illinois at the time, but came up for that. And I guess I had emulated his style as best I could throughout the years. So flexibility in the kicking, whatever. And he tapped me to be his partner for the entire 3-4 hour seminar. So I was
Wow.
getting kicked by my hero. It was the best thing ever. And at the end, when we were doing our picture together, he looked at me and he said, "Hey, we're going out to dinner afterwards. Come join us." And I was like in heaven. And so that
Yeah.
started a friendship. And so I've trained in the Superfoot system, of course, and it was very influential in my career. I've also trained in the Korean martial art of Hapkido. So I have a second dan in Hapkido. I've trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've trained in Muay Thai kickboxing. Trained, as most people do when they're around as long as I've been and you've been around, we start to pick up different systems. But those are my rankings that I have. Seventh dan in Taekwondo, ninth dan in the Superfoot system, second dan in Hapkido.
Nice spread that you have going on there. I mean, you're really covering a lot of area, which is very good. I don't know if you remember back well, of course you remember back to Bill's birthday bash. We were talking about, we know when Bill likes you because he'll kick you in the head.
That's right, of course.
Right. Right, it's the only way. And also, if you remember, we were talking about, I gave everybody the same question. All the people I interviewed, I gave everybody the same question. That was, how many times did Bill defend his title? And I got so many different answers. And Bill says, what, 30 times?
Well, he was 23-0 officially in his kickboxing career. He was 23-0, and he also was 2-0 in professional boxing during that time. Now he's done a multitude of exhibition bouts after that. So, and if you think about the World Championships, he had one preliminary match against Bernard Grotov from Germany, and then he fought Daniel Richer for the world title. And then every fight after that was for the world title. So he fought Joe Corley in May of '75. That was the first defense of a PK world title. And so every bout that he had after that was a title defense.
Right. But everybody gave me a different answer.
Well,
I have 13, I got 23.
I don't know if it's title. I guess if you had said technically title defenses, if the first fight against Grotov was a preliminary match, then you could say 20, and then he won. So I guess you could say 21 times he defended his title because the first two fights were to win the title.
Right. Right. And that makes perfect sense. But even when I asked Bill before, I said 30, but I was off. He even said 23 times he defended his title. And I was like, Bill, you couldn't have.
Now, when he went into that title, he had been ranked the top national point karate fighter for 3 years running. He was undefeated in 3 years in 71, 72, 73, and was the national point champion. So he was on a pretty good run from 71 to 80.
Maybe that's how he's looking at it. That could be how he's looking at it. That's why he's coming up at 23. I don't know. But it was funny asking everybody the question, and everybody gave me different answers. I had people give me 13 and all these other answers. So it was kind of funny. But and then you became how did you become this part of Bill that you are now?
Well, what ended up happening is he and I just had a great rapport with each other. And then we really got to know each other well in the early 90s because I was living in Cincinnati and then eventually Denver, which is where I'm located now. And I would go to Radford, Virginia each year to karate college. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, Dr. Jerry Beasley has been doing that, I think, for 30 plus years. And so I went there and I would train. And the way that would work is you had a number of instructors you were supposed to rotate to, but I would just stay with Bill Wallace the entire weekend. So I trained him on Thursday night. He would teach 2-hour seminars throughout the entire day on Friday and Saturday. I was with him in every class. And then on Sunday, he would do one with Joe Louis. And so that's where we really started to, deepen our friendship and relationship and his mentorship of me. And then after there, a couple of years, Jerry Beasley invited me to be an instructor there as well. And I was promoted as Bill Wallace's protege. And so I didn't teach my background obviously is Taekwondo. So I took the Superfoot principles and I equated them to Olympic style Taekwondo, which I won a national championship with in 1999. So I was using those same principles. So that's really, and then when he he wanted to officially start the Superfoot system in 2000. I was one of the first schools to join the organization. So that's how
Fantastic.
that evolved. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit here.
Okay, let's do it.
What core principles or philosophies from your martial arts do you apply to everyday life?
Oh my gosh, where do I start?
Take your time, enjoy.
In my speaking, I use these two phrases, and I definitely use these in my life. Is that a champion doesn't need to be told what to do; he just needs to be reminded. And that whole idea there is not just remembering the power that we have inside of ourselves, but also consciously changing and being very cognizant of our mindset, right? So that's one of the principles I learned in Korean Taekwondo. We have a term called pilsung, and it basically roughly translated in English to certain victory. So having that indomitable spirit, if you will. And that's one I use each and every day. We have the Taekwondo tenets: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. Those are things that I probably model every day. And then the final one, and I use this in my keynote speaking as well, is that a black belt is a white belt that never quit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that whole idea of the perseverance we need. Now, certainly me moving from having expert level in the martial arts and doing well in that endeavor, and then moving into keynote speaking, I had to become a white belt again. Right? No one was bowing and saying, "Hello, Sensei. Hello, sir. Good to see you. Thanks so much for honoring us with your presence." Didn't really have that kind. I had to earn that as well. But it was one of the best things for me in terms of development, because it's like they always say, it'd be a white belt, right? So I had to learn those skills as well, not only from executing on stage, but then also, of course, how to do the business of speaking. So it's been, but when I look at every element of my life, whether it was professional speaking, running my own business, playing Division I football, martial arts was at the base of all of them. The lessons that I learned, that was my foundation. So in, playing football in college, I was a good athlete, but I became a really good athlete because of my martial art training. Naturally I was a good athlete, but I was a really good athlete because of my martial art training. See, and I think business, relationships, parenthood, all those things, martial arts has had a huge influence in all of those.
Wow, that's great. And, it's funny because with me, I was never good at sports. I was okay with basketball, but anything with throwing or catching a ball, I just didn't have the coordination to do it. So when I got involved in martial arts later on after I finished high school, what happened was I started to get that from martial arts. So I understand what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying with that. To the audience, if you find this information interesting and helpful, hit like. All right, back to Chris. You often talk about breaking through both physically and mentally. What's a personal breakthrough that fundamentally changed how you teach others?
Well, and the whole breakthrough theme comes because I do corporate board breaking experiences, right? And I see the obstacle sometimes that board presents itself long before anyone ever strikes the board. It's all the mental stuff that's going on beforehand, right? And the conditioning that's brought them to that point. I'm going to get a little vulnerable right now, okay? And
it's okay.
Maybe something that martial art guys maybe don't share too often. But, I grew up in a household, first of all, with an alcoholic dad. So martial arts became my refuge. My mom and dad were both home, but my dad had some real struggles. And so my first martial arts instructor, Grandmaster J.K. Lee, who I still tremendously honor and love, was like my father figure growing up. But one of the things that I had is growing up in that environment, there was always a fear of the bottom dropping out. right? So when you grow up in that kind of a household, you don't know which way dad's going to show up that day, and it's difficult to develop some trust, right? So when I decided to open up my martial arts school back in 1995, I was in a corporate world and I was doing incredibly well. I was working for the top consumer products company in the country. I was a level one performer. The business I was responsible was over $33 million worth of business. I was one of those guys they were tapping for more and more responsibility, but my heart wasn't there. I remember very specifically being at a business review meeting with all this, my customers, CEO and president and CEOs and whatever. And this was in Boise, Idaho. And I was sitting there daydreaming about getting back to Denver to teach my Taekwondo class that I was going to be teaching later that night. That's when I knew I was probably not long for that career. So anyway, and I say this when I speak to entrepreneurs as well, is they'll concur with this idea is that opening your own business is not only the most exciting, but it's also the most terrifying time of your life, at least can be, right? Because all the doubts start coming up. So I had this experience in the business world where everything was going great, but now I'm going to go off on my own. And Ed, I started to have panic attacks. Okay.
Wow.
Started to have panic attacks. And if you or anyone in the audience has ever experienced those, I mean, the room starts spinning, your chest starts tightening, and all you can think about is everything that's going to go wrong. And it was my martial arts, as well as a cadre of students and people and my spouse at the time, and mental health professionals that helped me get through that. But if I wouldn't have had, that was probably the breakthrough in my own personal life up until that time. I certainly had challenges before that, but that was the time where I realized that I opened my school and I was still dealing with this, and I was getting ready to teach a class, the 4:30 intermediate class. And there were a couple kids on the mat. They were warming up. They were getting ready. And I was in the office shaken, like having this like panic thing happen. And all of a sudden it hit me. Their parents are paying me money to teach their kids about confidence and overcoming obstacles. And I'm in here with my knees knocking together. So I made a commitment to myself. This was my breakthrough. I said, every class I teach from here on out, I'm going to teach it with the same enthusiasm as if there were 20 students on the mat. Even though there might be only 2 out there now, I just opened the school, right? I'm going to teach it as if there were 20 on the mat each and every time. And pretty soon the classes started growing. And pretty soon the vision that I had for that school started coming. And as I shared before, after 2 years, I had 200 students at that location. And that was a breakthrough moment when I gave myself permission, Ed, to say, even though I've got fear, even though I have that anxiety, I'm going to show up anyway. And that's when it all broke through.
Wow. That's a great story. I love it. I love it. Wow. I've struggled with similar things, not as bad as that. In other words, like for me, it's like if I had to speak in front of people, I would lose my place, or I would have start saying something here, and I'd skip everything in the middle and just go right to the end.
See, the thing of it is we all have those aspects of ourselves.
Right.
For me, speaking has always been natural. Okay. For you, maybe not so much. Maybe you opening up in your own business, hey, that's no problem with that. We all have our own thing. And that's why martial arts can be so powerful.
Right.
Because it basically is this laboratory for us to get up, butt up against those challenges and to break through them. That's what we do. Whether it's in a class, at a tournament, doing a belt testing, we're put under that fire all the time.
Right.
And that's why some of the best martial artists weren't necessarily the best athletes when they started. They had something inside of themselves that allowed them to break through. And now then they maintained that, and then their physical skills started catching up to them, right?
Right.
Because they developed that inside themselves.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I know martial arts is great for that.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, we know many people struggle with discipline.
Yeah.
From your martial arts perspective, what's the biggest misconception about building it?
I'm going to share with you what I share with my students all the time. And it's going to seem like heresy when I make my first statement, but you're going to see where I'm going.
Okay.
Martial arts doesn't teach discipline. Martial arts teaches self-discipline.
Okay.
And when we begin to take accountability, responsibility for our own actions as martial artists, that's when discipline begins to have a positive influence in our lives. If the only reason that we as martial artists or as students of the martial arts are disciplined is because we have an instructor wagging their finger at us saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, it's only going to be as good as that other person is in the room with us. But when we have someone that holds us to a standard, see, in my coaching work, I make this distinction. I don't hold people accountable. I hold them capable. Now, what do I mean by that? Accountability can be a little pejorative. You said you're going to do this. I'm holding you accountable. No,
right.
Holding you capable says, Ed, I see greatness in you, and you communicated to me that this is where you want to be. I'm going to hold you to that standard. Now there's an empowerment there. And then, like I shared with you when we were off camera, I do a lot of the prep classes still for my martial arts organization here in Denver for Taekwondo schools, as well as I do that for the Superfoot organization. We do it virtually. I do pre-testing before. And I always tell the younger students, I said, whose responsibility is your black belt test? And it's
what kind of answers do you get for that?
Right. Well, sometimes I get some creative ones, but I'm like, no, it's your responsibility.
Right.
I know you don't have driver's licenses, so I can't expect you to drive to your workouts, but I can expect you to be dressed and ready to go with your bag in your hand, looking at your mom 20 minutes before class saying, Mom, it takes us 10 minutes to get to class. I'm ready. Let's go. Right?
Yeah.
That's self-discipline. And if we learn anything from martial arts, is we can take self-discipline and apply it to other parts of our lives. Martial arts becomes one of the greatest teachers we can have.
Right. I agree. You've mentioned coaching just recently and at other times. And you've coached thousands of students. What's one transformation story that still sticks with you today? Yeah. I see you smiling. You got a good one.
I've got tons, but I'm gonna share this one. This is when you kind of asked me this question before. This is the first one that came up because it's not. I don't always share this one, but this is the one I'm going to share. I had a young man come to me when he was about 8, 9 years old. His name is Nabil. Nabil had recently moved from Southern California to the Denver area with his mom, his single mom at the time, and his sister. And he had trained in martial arts in California. And I think if we asked Nabil today, what type of martial artist were you? He'd probably say, well, I was average at best, right? But man, this kid just kept showing up. He just kept showing up. And eventually, Nabil got his first degree black belt with me. And then he started on our leadership team. And then he got a second degree black belt with me. And then he started on our demo team. And pretty soon he's now one of my staff members. Okay. So he's teaching. And he was one of those kids that the parents absolutely loved. He was at this time maybe 17 years old. He acted like he was 21. The kids loved him. The parents loved him. And I knew that Nabil, upon graduating from high school, had one dream. He wanted to go to the Colorado School of Mines. It's one of the top engineering schools in the Western United States. His mom had now remarried. His stepdad was an engineer, and he wanted to follow that same path. So in our performance reviews throughout the years, Nabil had shared with me his dream of going to School of Mines. So one day I walk into the school, Nabil is already there. And rather than, standing at the front desk with his megawatt smile that he normally had, he looked really down and he said, "Sir, can we talk?" I said, "Absolutely." We went in the office and he proceeded to tell me that he had gotten the dreaded rejection letter from the Colorado School of Mines. So he was devastated. And it happened that I guess his freshman year of high school, he got a C in chemistry. Okay. So I'm like, well, Nabil, what are you going to do? He said, well, sir, I've thought a lot about it. I'm going to go to another university here in Colorado. I'm going to get my grades up, and I'm going to ask what prerequisites are, and I'm going to reapply to the School of Mines for my sophomore year. I said, Nabil, sounds like a great plan. I mean, 17 years old, pretty mature answer, right?
Sure.
Well, a couple
Yeah.
weeks go by, Ed, and I come back into the school, and there's Nabil at the front desk again. This time, he's got the Cheshire cat grin, and he's like, "Sir, can we talk?" I said, "Absolutely, buddy." So we go back in the office, and he proceeds to tell me this. On his own accord, on his own accord, he called up the admissions director at the Colorado School of Mines and requested a meeting. And during the course of his meeting, he not only was asking the questions, but he was talking about his enthusiasm for being at the School of Mines. And he was talking about his martial art background. He was just being Nabil, who he had trained to be in the martial arts.
Right.
And mid-sentence, the director of admissions holds up his hand. He said, "Stop right there." So Nabil says, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to get kicked out of this guy's office." And he says, "Stop right there. I'm admitting you to the School of Mines right now. Don't you ever get a C in chemistry again."
That's great.
I'm getting chills telling the story.
Yeah,
And
right.
a couple of months later, he got his third degree black belt with me. He's now graduate. He's working as an engineer. The moral of that story for me, the fact of the matter is he had learned those skills of self-confidence and being able to advocate for yourself and to communicate positively, even when it was an authority figure. And because of that, he made his dream come true.
That's awesome. That is just awesome. I love it. I love stories like that. That is great. And he's doing great, right?
Doing great. Doing great.
Wow.
Yeah, doing great.
Wow.
Super proud of him.
Yeah. I know one of the things for me, I don't have any stories like that. I'll tell you, no stories like that. But the greatest thing for me, from teaching so many students, and again, I haven't taught anywhere near the amount of students you've taught. Um, but when I look back at it, I'm like, I think the biggest compliment that I could get, and I've had a couple of students do this, is after they leave, even though they left early, they never even got to their black belt, where it was really the beginning of their training. And they left it the yellow belts, green belts. The greatest thing is that when they get in touch with me later on, years later, and they say, you know what? Well, I use Sensei. My title is Shihan, but I use Sensei because when you think about it, Shihan is master, Sensei is teacher or instructor, and that's really what we are. We're teachers and instructors. So when they get back to me and they go, you taught me this, you taught me that, and you know what? I still apply that to life today.
There you go.
I mean, that's just
Well, and I'll tell
awesome.
you, I was very blessed at the peak of our school. We had, I think I had three full-time staff members and I had another seven that were part-time. And I remember one time talking to a friend of mine who she had trained in martial arts years before, and she'd got a second degree in Hapkido. And of course, the first thing I asked her was, "Who was your instructor?" Right? And she couldn't remember his name. And I remember I went screaming back to the school that day. And at our staff meeting, I told the story and I looked at all my staff and I said, "We're going to make such an impact on every student that comes through these doors that they will never forget our names."
Right.
Right? Whether they went to yellow belt, whether they went to third degree, we want to make such an impact. And this isn't an ego thing. This is just like, I want to pour out as much as we can so that they never forget the impact that they had.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
that's
I
what
agree.
martial arts is all about.
Yeah. I agree. And that's what people don't understand. People think they're joining kicking and punching school. And it's not. There's so much more to it.
Absolutely.
To the audience, if you like the content, hit subscribe. Chris, I got a few more questions for you.
All right, I'm ready.
When someone feels stuck or overwhelmed, what's the first internal shift you encourage them to make?
So the first thing I'm going to say to people is to stop and get in touch with your breath and your body. Okay? So many times when we are agitated, we start running our minds and we start creating all the catastrophes that might happen. But when we're present in our bodies and we're present in our breath, it allows us to slow things down. And what I'm going to share with you is something I share a lot with my coaching clients and with my audiences when I speak. And I'll preface it by saying the quality of our lives is in direct proportion to the quality of questions we ask ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tony Robbins is famous for saying that, right? So
Yeah.
if we ask ourselves questions like, why is this happening to me? Why do I always have these problems? If you ask yourself crummy questions, you're going to get crummy answers. But if you ask yourself empowering questions, you get empowering answers.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I coach people on is when they're dealing with challenges is the first thing is once it's hit you, you felt it, and it's okay to feel agitated and scared. Don't push that away, but just don't stay there. Get in your breath, let it pass. Then ask yourself these 5 questions. Number 1 is what's really happening here? What's really happening here? Not your catastrophe stories of, oh my God, this. No, he said this to me, and as a result, I feel this way. I got this bill in the mail, and now I have an unexpected bill. That's what's happening. The rest of it is the story we give it. Does that make sense?
Makes
And
a
it's
lot of
the
sense.
story that gets us in trouble. So that's the first question. What's really happening here? Number 2 is what wants to happen here? Meaning, am I being guided in a different direction? I might think this is the way I'm supposed to go, but maybe I'm supposed to make a slight turn this way. Maybe I'm being guided in a different direction. Maybe not, but maybe I am. And then the final 3 questions kind of work in concert with each other. What do I need to keep doing? What are the positive behaviors and strategies do I need to keep doing in my life or in my business that have got me here that are working positively? What do I need to stop doing? What are the things that are not serving me, but I do them all the time because I've done them for 30 years? And then finally, what do I need to start doing differently? What new habits, what new strategies, what new affirmations in my mind, what do I need to start doing differently in order to overcome this challenge? So again, get into your body, let the fear pass, ask yourself what's really happening, what wants to happen here, and then what do I need to keep doing, what do I need to stop doing, and what do I need to start doing?
That's a great advice. Great advice. When you break it down like that and you start to think about it, it's like, yeah, that's true. It's really
Well,
true.
and and what I do in my work is I love to give people not only the big picture of why, but then give them strategic tools to use, right? Because it's one thing to say, well, just calm down. But if you've experienced, like I said, panic attacks like me, it's not that easy to just calm down. There, you need to have, just like when we tell kids, before you use your physical skills to defend yourself, use your words. Okay, that's great. But when you're 9 years old, maybe you don't know what words to use.
Right.
So you teach them the words to use to de-escalate, to fend off, right?
Right.
And from that starting point, now they can gain the confidence and hopefully diffuse a situation. So I'm a big guy on not only understanding the big picture, but also then having practical tools to execute.
Yeah. I would love to take one of your motivational speaking courses, or
Well, maybe afterwards we'll talk. I got one coming up, actually.
Okay, well, we'll definitely have to talk about that. All right. Failure.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Failure. Failure is something that is a reoccurring theme in personal growth. We've all had it. We've all had it multiple times. And how has failure shaped your own path as a teacher and leader? Now, you touched on this before, but if you could just open up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example from my life as well. And I will tell you, I don't like losing. I don't like failing. I am a very gracious winner, but inside of myself, if I have not performed to where I think I'm really hard on myself, really hard on myself. And that's, we all have our things we're working on, right?
Right.
And in fact, I'll just give you this little tidbit. One of the things I've used in order to overcome failures and have success is visualization. Because years ago, I had one of my mentors tell me, Chris, if you're going to fantasize, you might as well win, right? Because so many of us, when we are in challenge, we think about all the things that can go wrong. And, I live here in Colorado, and I'm not a huge skier, but I'm told that when people ski between the trees, you don't want to look at the tree because you're gonna go where you're looking. You want to look at the space between the trees, right?
Hey.
So, but I know in my own personal life, I'll use a martial arts example. In 1999, I was blessed to win the United States Taekwondo Union's National Taekwondo Championship, heavyweight division, 33 to 40 years old or something like that. So I was the heavyweight black belt gold medalist, national champion in 99. But in 98, I took silver. Took silver. I lost in the finals. I actually think that year I fought better than I fought in 98. I it's full contact, knocked out the first guy, beat the next guy 10-0, fought the next guy who had taken second the year before, knocked him down with a spin hook kick, won the match. I mean, I was on. And then I got to the finals and I got outfoxed by a guy that wasn't better than me physically. He was just sneakier, right? He was sneaky. And I really took that loss hard. And I remember I thought my career competitively was done. But my wife at the time was super encouraging me about going back. And so the first year was in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa State University. Then the following year was in Daytona Beach at Embry-Riddle University. And I remember going back there and just thinking, using that experience that I had in 98 as my fuel for what I was going to do in 99. And in training, I had injured my hamstring, okay, prior to that tournament. And in the third round of the first match, I throw a spin hook kick at a guy. He blocks it. I contract the hamstring and I feel it go ping. And I'm like, oh no, right?
Whoa.
First match, I was already in control of the match. I knew I was going to win that one, but now I've got 3 more matches to win the championship, and I just hurt my hamstring. So I went in the back, had my coach, massage it out. He wrapped it really well, and then I went into visualization, like I had done so many times before, and I had personally rehearsed what would happen if I got injured, how I was going to overcome that. And I did, and I don't think I got scored on, but maybe once during the entire rest of my matches.
How'd you do it?
How'd I do it?
Share with the audience.
How did I do it? I had already rehearsed those matches time and time again before I ever hit the floor. I had already rehearsed those matches in my mind in the weeks before that tournament. So when I was there, I was already in that mode. So one of the big things that I think we can do, particularly when failure is there, number one, I got to a point, I was a little pissed off. I got injured, and I said, I'm going for it, right? I'm already here. I don't want to be that guy that had this experience and then go home and say, well, I hurt my hamstring, so I had to bow out. I just wasn't going to let myself do that. But I was comforted, if you will, by the fact that I rehearsed those matches in my mind so many times before that I'm like, I've been here. I don't have to be scared of this anymore. So for me, anytime I do anything, whether it's a speech, a coaching, an interview like this, every morning I have a visualization process I do that gets me ready for that day. Now, does it always happen that way? No. But it builds in me a confidence that I know I can deal with it because I've already rehearsed it, right? In my mind. And quite honestly, I learned that first when I read Chuck Norris's book as a 13-year-old, Winning Tournament Karate. Maybe I was 11, and he talked about the power of visualization. And so I do it all the time. So
I have a question that just came up now, and I know what I tell my students, and I know what I think, but I'd like the audience to know what you think about this. How much is martial arts mental and physical?
There's all sorts of ways that you can combine it, in terms of, or clarify it in terms of percentages. I've heard, in the self-defense standpoint, it's 10% technique, 90% attitude, right?
Okay.
And, but there's definitely a physical component. I always tell my students the week before they're going to test for their black belt, I say, okay, you've all gone through all this training, and this next week, I need you to just train moderately, but most of it's going to be visualization. And I talked to him about this study that the University of Chicago did years ago, where they brought people in and did free throws. Okay. And they had them all come in, they do free throws, and they marked where they're at. And then they divided them into 3 groups. Okay. And the first group, they said, over the next 6 weeks, we don't want you to think about basketball. We don't want you to pick up a basketball. Just come back in 6 weeks and we'll do this again. The second group, they had them practice free throws for 10 to 15 minutes every day, 6 days a week for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The third group, they had them not pick up a basketball, but visualize taking free throws 10 minutes every day, 6 weeks. When they came back, Ed, Group A saw no increase in their ability to make free throws, which makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't pick up a basketball, didn't think about it. Group two showed a 24% increase in their ability to make free throws. But here's the kicker. Group 3 showed a 23% increase in their ability to make free throws.
Wow.
Now, I always tell my students, note, I'm telling you this story at the end of your black belt candidacy because I didn't want you sitting around for 12 weeks, right? Just saying, I'm going to visualize this, sir. Right? But it shows the power of visualization.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell my students it's 85% mental and 15% physical. That's what I tell my students. I don't know
what the percentage is, but the percentage in terms of scientific data, which at least in this study, that it's incredibly powerful.
Wow. Yep. It really is. Really is. If you could give people one daily practice to strengthen their mindset, what would it be and why?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have in one of my books, I wrote something called The 6 M's of Morning Mastery. Okay. And what I'm going to say is I'll just give this as a generic answer. And if you want me to go into the 6 M's, I'm happy to do it. But I would say one thing is to have a powerful morning routine, whatever that is for you. Many people will just react to life, right? Get up in the morning, they have their cup of coffee, they get in their car, they go to work. They get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they go to school, and they don't have any vision or plan for the day, and they haven't done any pre-work for that day. And so I've been doing now for the last 15 years. When I first started hearing about this concept, I have basically the first hour of my day, I do 6 practices. And the first M stands for meditation. So I spend 20 minutes in meditation. Now, meditation doesn't mean that you need to be sitting on a pillow chanting Om. You might get it being in nature. You might get it sitting on your deck and looking at the sun come up, whatever. But spending some quiet time each and every day. So that's the first thing I advocate. Next is mental imaging. Scott, we've talked about this already, right? Picturing your day. Like today, I already rehearsed my day this morning. I got up at 5 o'clock, and when I was doing my meditation, I was rehearsing this conversation. Not in great detail, but it was, I was in it, right? I was visualizing and feeling good about it, right? Then the next one is what I call mind treatment. And that's where you're giving positive, affirmative statements in your mind, right? You have positive, affirmative statements that you rehearse each and every day, Number 4 is movement. Do some sort of movement every day. Note I didn't say exercise, but some stretching. I've been doing push-ups and calisthenics for the last, oh my gosh, I started in 2004 every day. I do push-ups and crunches and flexibility to start my day. It takes me 11 minutes, but that's what I do. Number 5 is motivation. And what that is whether it's through books or whether it's through YouTube videos or whatever. I mean, my gosh, what excuse do we have nowadays? We've got the greatest teachers on the planet. All you have to do is go on your phone and look somebody up and you can hear a 10-minute, right? So number 5 is motivation. And number 6 is memoir, is doing some sort of journaling every day. So Now, that might sound like a lot to do. I always tell people choose one if you're not doing anything. Choose one of those activities and just start and make it part of your morning routine, because we've all had experiences where the alarm goes off late and we're rushing through our morning, and the rest of the day is usually pretty bad too. But if we take time
Right.
to anchor ourselves in the morning, the rest of the day tends to unfold much more gracefully.
Hmm.
I know that was a super long answer to a very small question, but that's what I teach.
Yeah. But it was all uh, as you're talking, I sometimes I get lost in the person who I'm talking to because of what they're saying. And just now I'm thinking back to my life and all the things you're saying. I was like, yeah, he's right. Yeah, he's right. It's true. It's true. Um, Looking ahead, what impact do you hope your work will have on the next generation of leaders and martial artists?
I got to tell you, this one really. I love answering this question, and I'm going to give you a little example of this. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I was a keynote speaker here in Colorado Springs, for an event that the title of the conference was "Kindness as a Superpower." Kindness, acts of kindness is a superpower. So I was
Mhm.
asked to be the keynote speaker because this person knew of the work that we've done. So I'm super, super proud of all the people that have got their black belts with me. Super proud of what we've done in the Superfoot organization, heading that up. But probably the thing that I'm most proud of is something that we've installed about 20 years ago. So our students who test for their black belt, whether it's 3, 4 months prior to them testing, and they have to train with us 3 to 3.5 years to get to this point, they go in their black belt candidacy program. And we have an app that they actually have to track behaviors during that time. So they have to do 4,000 push-ups and 4,000 crunches. They have to run 40 miles. They have to spar 120 rounds. So, and they have to do their kata, their form 120 times each one of them. So anyway, there's a lot they have to do physically. But that's probably not what I'm most proud of. They have to um, they have to do mentoring of a particular person for 10 sessions. Okay. They have
Mhm.
to read 4 books. They
Mhm.
have to do a book report on one of them. They have to eat clean for an entire week. They
Mhm.
have to, no sugar, no processed foods, no alcohol. Getting 10-year-olds off beer is tough, but happen. And then the other one that I'll share with you now, which is when you ask about the idea of legacy, is they have to do um, 400 random acts of kindness.
Wow.
And I said this last week in my keynote, but now when I've done the numbers, I think I'm way off. I told them we've logged at least 250,000 random acts of kindness in the last 20 years. But then I did the math and I thought, well, if I had 2,000 to get their black belt and they each did 400 acts, that's 800,000 acts of kindness.
Mhm.
But let's meet in the middle. Let's say we've got 500,000 random acts of kindness. And every black belt has to do that. And in fact, the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation is actually headquartered here in Denver. And I found that out and I called them up and I told them what we're doing. And they came out with a film crew and they, filmed everything we're doing around it. So when I talk about my legacy in martial arts, that comes to the top of the list, because when someone has to get 400 random acts of kindness done in 4 months, you have to proactively look for them, right?
Mhm.
It ends up being 3 a day over 6 days a week over 4 months. But when you have to actively look for them, Ed, it becomes a habit.
Right. Sure.
And now what ends up happening is that becomes part of a lifestyle. And I've had students tell me how they still utilize that practice in their life. So yes, am I excited when someone can do a vertical side kick? And am I excited when someone can, do well in a competition and all those things? 100%. Because I
Mhm.
want good martial arts skills.
Right.
But what I really want is to develop good human beings. And the acts of kindness plus other things we do, which I won't get into here, I think is really it's the template for helping them learn those skills. And that's what I want my legacy to be.
That's a great legacy. I like that. Chris, I have a couple more questions for you,
Okay.
but I just want to take a little intermission here real quick and address the audience. I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for watching. I truly hope you're enjoying these interviews as much as I am. If you are, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel. It really helps keep us going. If you feel led to support the show by going to martialartspastandpresent.com, hit about at the top of the page and scroll down to PayPal. Every bit of support that you can give us means a lot, and I want to thank you. Back to Chris. What is the funniest or most unexpected thing that's happened to you during training or competition?
Okay, so I was going to give you a student story, but I'll give you a competition story.
Okay.
I was competing. It was Olympic style Taekwondo. It would have been 1985. I was competing. I had just completed my 4 years of playing football at Northwestern University. I was getting back into my Taekwondo training, and I was competing in the state Taekwondo championships. And again, Olympic Taekwondo, full contact fighting, rounds, you go continuous rounds. It's not points. It's kind of like an Olympic boxing match would be, continuous fighting. And I think it was the semifinal match. So I ended up losing in the finals to a guy that became a 3-time USTU national champion, but I'm still mad about that fight, but I won't talk about that. But in the semifinal fight, back in the day, we used to have our pants. Taekwondo, we call it a dobak. In Japanese, you call it a gi.
Mm-hmm.
Our pants, they weren't elastic. They were drawstring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you pull them out like this, and then you have loops, and you tie them in.
Sure. I still wear those today.
Yeah, and you still have them today. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, I'm in the semifinal match, and I'm fighting this guy, and I'm beating him, and it's going well. And all of a sudden, he kicks low, and we have a chest guard in Taekwondo called a hogu, right?
Mm-hmm.
Chest guard. So for some reason, I think his foot gets under the hogu or something, and it catches the drawstring, and the drawstring snaps. And my pants.
Oh no.
So now I got to catch the pants and rip off. So the head referee's not too happy with me. So he gives me 1 minute to get new pants. And if I don't change in 1 minute, I lose the match. So I have to run out of the ring with my pants hitched up with my hands, go, behind some door. I think I retied them and got it fixed, and then ran back out and finished the match and won. So that's one of my funny stories of competition.
That's a good one. I like that one too. How could he hold that against you?
Hey,
your fault.
Hey, I was just, I didn't, I guess, but nowadays, it's elastic waistbands in Taekwondo, so you don't have to worry about it. So,
right. Yeah, that's true. I know everybody wears the elastic now. We're not going to get into it, but when the Velcro belts came out, that bothered me. Anyway, we'll get into that another time.
Okay.
What lessons from the past do you think are most relevant for martial artists today?
I think as instructors, it's really important for us, if we want our students to respect us and honor us, is that we honor and respect our teachers, and that we show that as an example. So for instance, when I'm around Bill Wallace, or if I'm around, Grandmaster J.K. Lee, I want to exhibit, not only because I love and respect them, but I'm going to show them respect, not only because of my love and respect for them, but I want to role model that for my students too. That even though I'm whatever rank black belt I am, I'm still a student, and I can still be a junior. And does that make sense?
Yes, makes
So
perfect sense.
One of the most important lessons, and in that way, evaluating our elders. The ones that have come before. We live in a day and age where martial arts are more, they're more accessible than ever before, right? There's a school on every corner. When I trained with Grandmaster Lee back in the old dark ages, I had to drive 30 miles one way to train with him.
Wow.
Because I lived in this little town, right? I had to drive 30 miles to train with him. And so, and I want things to be accessible, right? But there's a real value when you have to do that much work. And I would travel 2 to 3 days a week plus teaching 3 days a week, right? So 6 days a week, I was training or teaching in martial arts during that time.
Right.
So I just think it's really important that we honor the people that came before us. And as a result of that, make sure that honoring of our students is there as well. And what do I mean by that? It doesn't mean that we don't hold them to a standard, and it doesn't mean that we don't give them some tough love when they need it. But we make sure that we love them, that it comes from a place of love. Because I know for me as an athlete and as a martial artist, I liked it when my instructors were tough on me. And I oftentimes will say this to my martial arts students. When I was playing college football one time, my position coach screamed at me because I screwed up. And I gave him the stink eye. But I realized I was mad at me, not him. And he came over to me and he put his arm around me and he said, Natske, I need you to understand something. When I stop yelling at you, that's when you need to start worrying, because then I don't care anymore. And I was like, right? So it's not like we want to browbeat our students, but we want to hold them to that standard. But we want to make sure that they know we're doing it from a place of love.
Right.
That we're doing that because we're holding them to a standard. Because I really think, particularly kids, when they know that someone's in their corner that way, they will do anything, and because they sense that. Think about it. Whether it's in martial arts, ed, or maybe it was in school, the teachers that were the toughest on you are the ones you probably appreciate the most.
Yep, the ones you remember the most.
You remember the most. And again, when you realize they were doing it because they loved you and they were doing it because they wanted you to be your best, oh my gosh, that's the best gift anyone could ever give you.
Right. Well, second best, but yes, okay. We'll count that as a whole other separate conversation. But it is. It is. Chris, this has been fun. If people want to know more about you, how can they find you? Have you wrote any books or papers that you could tell people about? Maybe they'd like to read them.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. First of all, they can first go to my website, which is my name, chrisnatsky.com. That's CHRIS, N as in Navy, ATZ as in zebra, KE.com. And that has, all my programs that I do, speaking and coaching. It's got a number of video things of me on stage. It's got testimonials from past clients as well as folks that have brought me in to speak. So that's there. And then I also have 2 books. One is called Black Belt Leadership, which I published in 2013. And it's what I utilize when I go and I speak on leadership to corporations around the country. And then my second book is called Breaking Through, and that's based on my board breaking experience. But it's really in Black Belt Leadership, I have 7 qualities of Black Belt leadership that I expound upon. In Breaking Through, it's like, how do you have a breakthrough in your life? And I have 10 steps that you can take in order to do that. And so that's what Breaking Through is all about. And then, of course, I have an upcoming program called the Breaking Through Coaching Program. So if anybody's interested, they can go on the website and check out details for that. And if you want to give me a call and have a discussion around that, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Fantastic. Chris, I want to thank you for allowing me to interview you today. I've enjoyed this time, and hopefully in the future, you're going to come back and we'll do some more.
Love to.
All right. Chris, thank you again. I appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks so much.
Make sure you look into Super Patch. It's great for boosting immunity, athletic performance, pain reduction, and much more. Visit mapap.superpatch.com to learn more. Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about us, visit our Substack at martialartspastandpresent.com. If you would like to support us, go to patreon.com/martialartspastandpresent. If you like the content and have not yet subscribed, you can find us on all of the major platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube.